let's talk about this. So when you look at
Let me grab my notebook.
the master grant application, it's a tool that I created for my customers to explicitly help them centralize core data about their organization and their key projects or programs, or a program or project that they're looking to get funded. In the world of efficiency, time management, effectiveness, consistency, a master grant application is a tool that helps nonprofits mature and otherwise get to the point of organizing their information and submitting it on time, every time, consistently with consistent content that doesn't require major editing or rewriting. So as we've been talking about since the beginning of class, that all of the homework assignments are designed to be realistic. This is no different. Whereas if you came up with a credible idea that can be sustained not only in the marketplace for in competing for dollars with customers who don't have to give it to you, and you can sustain it with a grant application, then you're really moving in an interesting direction towards sustainability for your organization, your program. So a grant application is a part of telling your story. It is also a part of, communicating your strategy, your approach, your competency, your philosophy of the work, and, communicating to funders that you are a credible investment, for this idea. And so it's broken down into sections. The first section you see here is all about just the basic information about the organization, right? So key contact, primarily it's your CEO or it's the director of development, but someone of that ilk is being entered in here. There are funders who do want to see your social media handles if you have any, so that they can just evaluate what you're posting, right? It gives further context to the story. It
Mm.
gives further context to the background of who you are. And in some cases, funders may want to follow you and be a part of the journey socially and say, we follow this group. We want to tag you. If we fund you, we want to, be able to share what you're doing on our timeline, etc. So they'll ask for that information. Then there will be sections in the grant application that asks for other basic organizational information, such as your mission, your vision statement, your core values, your organizational history. So when you're typing this stuff in, I don't think I have any word count limitations here. So you can go as far and as long and as deep as you want. But a word of caution for, a real application, there will likely be character or word counts that you're going to have to manage for. So since I don't have it here in this particular sample, don't worry about it, but just be mindful of that when you're putting this information together. For basic
Your class.
program information, you do need a program name. So what's the name of the idea, the concept that you're proposing? And you want to tick off a box. Now, I do have limited box options in this sample on purpose. If it doesn't neatly fit in any of these boxes, just simply put other and then type it in, for yourself, and then say more about the project, right? Who's your target population? Again, very limited options here. If you don't see it, hit other, and then talk about your customer. This is going to be important because now in certain grant applications, particularly the extensive ones, they are very interested in you talking about your customer. Who is it that you're targeting for this work? This does a couple of things. One, it brings clarity to the approach of your work, but it also communicates to the funder your core competency and knowledge about the customer. So this is where nonprofits who are newer or whose programs and ideas are not as mature, they kind of get in trouble because your funders are really, really smart. And so they can read this and determine, okay, if you are serving at-risk youth, but how you describe them, the demographics, etc., they can tell if you're not as seasoned as you should be when you're competing for these dollars. So organizations that are new, part of the reason why they need to get a couple years under their belt is to really learn the client, the customer, that they're serving, their demographics, the industry, the work, all of the things that go into it. And we had a conversation several weeks back. Lee was being presented with an opportunity to acquire or merge with a nonprofit that does book reading and mobile reading.
Right.
And while I think she said it was something that she liked, the upskilling, the steep learning curve would come back to haunt her at some point, right? Unless staff comes with it, but it will come back to haunt because if the staff doesn't stay, or if she feels that the staff isn't a fit for her organization, or that there isn't just any resources for the staff and they're just selling or letting go of that book of business, um, then Lee, when she's getting pursuing funding, whether it's sponsorships or grant applications or even contracts to compete for services, it will be painfully obvious that there is a significant knowledge and skill gap, and it will show up in the grant application, no matter how much you dress it up. So it's really a telltale sign of your knowledge and your capacity to take on this work. If there's preferred language that you want to use to describe your customers, you want to put it here. We have a client that does not like to use language for Black and Brown people, to kind of indicate their disadvantage, right? Because of race or color or geography, right? Any language like that, it's a non-starter for them because it's a part of their messaging, their core values, how they show up. And so there are things that they prefer to say to describe their customers. A good example is people who are coming home from prison. You know, the terminology today is these are justice involved persons, people who are involved in the justice system, or if they're coming home from prison, they're returning citizens.
Hmm.
So if you're going to use words like ex-con in your language, just understand that funders who are deep in this work, when they see that, they know that you're not plugged in, because language has it continues to change and evolve. And of course, as I get further and further removed from certain operations or certain core projects, you know, the language that's being communicated in this video may not be relevant, right? So be mindful of the evolution of language. Language to avoid. What language do you not want to communicate, right? So you don't want to use the word ex-con, right? We don't use
Right.
that, but we'll say returning citizen. So whatever it's relevant to your idea, you want to make sure you highlight that. What's the program budget, not the organizational budget, program budget. This is also a telltale sign of capacity and knowledge. If you are a youth serving organization and you say all I need is $5,000 to do, to serve 1,000 families and give out turkeys and toys for Christmas, and to do a youth program that does workforce development and get the kids off the street and save lives, the funder will immediately realize and say, "Is there a typo? Did you mean 50 or 500,000? No, we just need 5,000." Then this is not for you, because the capacity of the grant you're pursuing, right? That they have capacity for much more. Now, if the grant limit is 5,000 and they are one of several funders in a portfolio, that's different. But if you're pursuing a major funder, you say all I need is 5,000, and the average award is going to be six figures plus. It's a telltale sign that there's limited capacity in the leadership and the staff, etc. So it's going to be important for you to think about, what's that program budget going to be? What's the problem statement? What's the community need that you're trying to resolve? Now we need to describe the project overall. What are you trying to do? And I provide a methodology here that I have used for years. And I use this in so many arenas and so many applications. But these are what I call the 5 strategy questions. So it starts off with, where are we now? This is a part of putting together your program narrative. You will see questions in your grant application that look somewhat similar to these. They won't say these exact words or terms, but you will notice questions in major applications that really ask these questions. So first one is, where are you now? What is the current history? What is the current situation that your program is dealing with, or your customer is dealing with? What's the right now? What's the good, the bad, and the ugly all at once? You can go organizational, you can go customer, you can go industry, you can go any direction. In fact, you might want to have multiple. So a good example is, let's do a youth serving organization. In our current state, there are 7,000 opportunity youth in our city. That means that these are 7,000 young people between the ages of 18 and 24 who are not connected to the workforce system, who are not enrolled in advanced education or ongoing education opportunities, and who currently do not have a future pathway identified for self-sufficiency and economic mobility. Further, we believe we have a solution for those young people. However, our current funding limits or funding limitations has limited our ability to expand the number of people we can serve. So right now in 2023, with the year almost being over, we have served, let's say 1,672 young people. But we think that we have capacity to serve nearly 3,000 young people, but our current financial situation does not allow us. And we would like to double our service output. And what you're getting, that's kind of the bad parts, right? In our organization and with the youth. Well, the other right now situation to think about too is and I just saw this stat, for every 3 unemployed people, there are 5 job opportunities for them to choose from, which means for opportunity youth, if there's 7,000 opportunity young people, then that means that there's double, in some cases, triple job opportunities for them. There's roughly 18 to 21,000 jobs available for them to choose from. And we want to be able to help our young people identify the opportunity that works for them and aligns with their future. So the right now speaks of challenges. It speaks of opportunities. It speaks of good, the bad, the ugly. So it's all about telling the truth. The next question is, well, where do you want to go? It's a vision statement. So given the right now situation, limited resources, a desire to double services, a proven track record, which is also part of the right now story too. We've been doing this for X number of years. We serve 1,600 young people, right? So where do you want to go? What's the vision? Well, we want to serve 3,000 young people and connect roughly 80% of them to open opportunities that are that are connected to self-sustaining wages, economic mobility opportunities, and helps them get on the pathway of developing potentially a career pathway that provides self-sufficiency long term. That's the vision, right? You may have a vision that says we want to serve 3,000 young people, get them connected to jobs to reduce crime in our community, or to reduce poverty, or to increase access to housing, or transportation, or to increase access to childcare. Whatever the mission or purpose is, this vision statement, this is where this is going to go, because the funder's going to want to know, well, what are you selling? What are you putting out there, and why? The third question is, well, how do you get there? If your vision is to serve 3,000 young people, and you want to connect them all to jobs, and you want to see them economically self-sufficient, how do you get there? What are the steps, the strategies, the approaches? This is fairly high level. Fourth question is, well, fourth question is, what steps do you need to take to get there? So you go from high level. Now you got to explain on a much more deeper level each of those strategies. What are your subtasks, action plan stuff, etc. Fifth question is, well, how do you measure success? Whether it's number of people served, whether it's number of people recruited, whether it's other KPIs that you identify for the services, number of people placed, number of employers engaged, average wages for young people, like whatever is relevant to your program, you want to identify those measurements of success. I'm a big believer in program partners, that you will see this in grant applications. But from a tactical perspective, program partners really are essential to your success. They are a lifeline. And one of Lee's examples this semester, we talked about partnering with big brothers, big sisters, right? Recruiting talent to go into the school, recruiting from the school district, et cetera. Those are your partners. Those are organizations that have credibility, standing, maturity, that can add value, and are recognized names to the funders you're pursuing. Okay, so they're partnering with so-and-so organization. Oh yeah, we fund them, we know them, or we're familiar with them. What's your timeline, right? Generally want to speak in quarters, Q1, 2, 3, or 4, and the year. And then what are your accomplishments over the years? So we serve 1,600 young people. Of the 1,600, we were able to help get 89% placed. We were able to see an average of $18.62 per hour in wages for our young people. We were able to see an increase of 30% of young people access childcare for the children. We've seen a significant increase in our young people access transportation, steady transportation, right? Whatever those stats are, tell your story because funders want to know what that is. Increasingly, since George Floyd's murder, has been significant questions around DEI inclusion, right? What's your approach from a staffing standpoint, from a board standpoint, from a programmatic standpoint? Talk about your philosophy. If you don't have one, this is a really good chance, a good opportunity to get that together.
What is
Key,
DEI?
diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay.
Yep. And next up would be staff. Typically, I only highlight three staff people, but here's the format: name and their biography, just a paragraph about what they do, what they're about, their contribution to the work, their skill set, what role they will play in the project. Recognition plan, I kind of have that built in for you, but you can kind of create your own too. Funders want to know if we fund you, and some funders may already have a recognition plan policy and packet for you to follow. Some funders don't. They just want to know, how are you going to recognize us? How are you going to shout us out? Social media, website, mailer, newsletter. You're going to put up cheerleading signs at the next high school football game. I don't know. Tell us what you're going to do, right? You're going to release one of those airplanes with the signs and on a tail saying we got funded by so and so foundation. Like, tell us so we can. That's a good one. So we can know, how we can support the marketing and messaging of our investment in your work. Sustainability plan, key information. How are you going to sustain this project, right? Who else are you pursuing? What other funders have you secured and pursued to keep the work going, right? Funders do not want to be in the business of being the only funder of your project or your work. They don't want to be the reason you go out of business. They don't want to be the reason you stay in business. They don't want to be the reason why there are questions around payroll and bill payment, etc. So, what are your current funders, future funders? Who are you pursuing? Who's actively on your list of folks to pursue?
Dr.
We
Clark,
Yes.
relative to the sustaining question, what is your thought process? Like, some grants are very specific of what is that 3 to 5 year sustainability plan? Like, because exactly like what you said, they don't want to give us one-time funding and then next year the program doesn't exist. In your experience, especially if there's no criteria that we are outlining, is it that 2 to 4 year? Is it, the next 3 to 5 years? Like, is there a sweet spot that we need to show that we have intentionally thought about how to sustain this going forward?
It depends, right? Because tapping into multi-year funding is an increasing enigma for organizations. 2 year, 3 year funding. If you're able to secure 2 year, 3 year fund opportunities, that is a projection. So, what I have found and what we do for our clients is that we highlight funders as much as we can that have, committed a multi-year investment to us as a current funder and future funder, particularly if you've tapped into statewide foundations, large regional community foundations, or have secured a contract with your city or state to do a major body of work. Those are considered typically multi-year funders if you're able to secure it at any level. Next up, depending on the timing, you also want to highlight folks that you have secured on a year by year basis. So there are funders who will fund you for 3 years at a time, but won't give you a 3 year commitment. You'll just have to reapply. So depending on when you're applying for another funder, that funder that's already secured is either considered secured and or is in the position of a pending application. Right. So I think that's the best way to think about it and approach it. The other way to think about it too is if you have partners at the table that you're bringing on this project, their secured and pending applications count towards the sustainability of this project too. All right. Does that help?
Yes. I mean, I know like where we are, the MOUs are for, the next calendar year or the next academic year, renewable annually. So there is a statement of, okay, in a year we can reevaluate and
Hmm.
adjust going forward, but that the conversation is that this is an ongoing program. We just may need to tweak it on an annual basis as to what that looks like going forward.
Yep. So if you're closer to the end of that funding year and you know you're going to resubmit a new app, it becomes either secured or pending,
Okay.
depending on your strategy for the application you're submitting for another funder.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Yep. And I do recommend, having a solid mix, 50-50, 60-40. I like to show more secured funding, funded. I like to show more secured funders than not. Because if you're showing a 30-70 mix where 30 is secured and 70 is pending, how would you feel if you're making a decision, and you're part of the decision is, well, you're coming to our foundation and we're part of the 70, but what if we don't like your idea? Well, what if we don't feel this is not the right time or fit, right? So it doesn't sound as good. So I think there's creative options to think about when looking at how to present and pursue sustainability. I do think that being monolithic and being rigid in how you present stuff can create some challenges for you, which is why, in some cases many cases you don't have your accounting person do the stuff. It's mainly the development person or the ED who has kind of a perspective of relationships to say that's going to be a pending or that's secured or it's pending and we expect the application to be finalized or approved in 30 to 45 days or 60 days because most EDs and funding development leaders, they have a feel for many of the funders that they're pursuing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, Organizational files. This is not exhaustive. Um, this section is not designed for you to go find this stuff, especially if you're doing this for the first time and or you're doing this of an organization that you're not associated with. This is designed to say, hey, if you're going to start pursuing funding opportunities, you might want to start organizing these docs on a regular basis and updating them on an annual basis on schedule. Your updated 990, approved budget, audited financials, list of board members, 501c3 letter, W-9 form, et cetera, et cetera. And that is it
Okay.
for new. So I mean, just to kind of riff a little bit. So you're right. And I think one of the hardest transitions for me was when I was no longer in operations and I, you know, became a full-time consultant. Part of the magic of fundraising is less about what's written on paper and more about the relationships. I miss that part. I miss getting to know partners and funders and learning their stories and their vision for what's next and how what we're doing could possibly be in alignment. There have been many times that we've secured funding over coffee way before an application came out. And that's the relationship game that I fell in love with, right? We raised millions doing that. So now in my role as consultant and uh, just someone who's there to support our clients, we can advise, but we don't get involved in the relationship piece because every funder is different. And I think that there's just a key component for you as a leader for you to learn how to build effective relationships because there are a lot of times that you're going to get a heads up about an opportunity well before something is written and it's going to be a formality. And if it's a fresh relationship, it like you said, well, we give our clients a 30 to 50% success rate for brand new apps, unknown, no relationship, no funding history, etc. And so you got to have thick skin. You got to rotate through these opportunities. You got to keep it moving. The thing also I'll tell you about the story process, it's weird because you got people who have been, they are effective like um uh, investigative writers. There are people who are good research writers, academic writers, people who are good poetic writers. It's literally a little bit of this, that, and everything in between, and that mix, whatever that nexus point is, that's good grant writing. You got to have your data and your research, your good academic foundation. You got to tell good stories. Got to understand the characters in the story. I believe that there has to also be some poetry to this thing. How you articulate the nuances of the work and say it in a different way, not for shock value, but to give people something to think about. And I'll give you an example. We during pre COVID and during COVID, I did a lot of workforce development for youth, young adults, returning citizens, etc. And instead of talking about workforce development as like this thing we do for people who can't do for themselves, the language began to shift on my team, talking about how do we help employers identify talent within urban centers. The thing about that, how do you help employers find talent within urban centers? Because pre-COVID, particularly during COVID, employers were losing people left and right through death, resignation, or retirement, or termination, meaning you got fired too. And businesses were still going on. So my keywords now, how do you help employers connect with talent, available persons who can fill job opportunities in urban centers? Another way of saying the inner city, where Black and brown, highly barriered families, individuals exist where they live. And that became a conversation. Now, though that's language you may hear from professional HR folks, right? We're not an HR business, but there's some overlap, right? And so learning how to tell that story about, young Jimmy, who's 19, just as involved, living in a difficult situation, and how he's fighting through every situation he's been through to make himself available and attractive to an opportunity that is being presented to him. Like, what's that story like? So now you're an investigative reporter where you're also researching all this information about Jimmy, about the employer. Then you're an academic person, you're telling the stats, and now you're a poet. It's a little bit of everything. And it's almost like your grandmother, who she made this amazing meal, but never wrote the recipe down because it was here in the head and here in the
Mm-hmm.
heart. And then before the meal's ready, she gets a little spice, this little pinch, and it makes the difference in an ordinary dish. Just that pinch. That's what grant writing is like to me. For mature or non-mature organizations, partners can be all the difference, right? I have a class that I sell called How to Raise Serious Money or Land Your Next Major Grant with a Partner, because your partner lends credibility to what you're trying to get funded. Even if you've been in business for a long time, you may be introducing a very new project that has not been associated with your organization in the past. So what you do, you go get a partner who has credibility, you bring them to the table. You also take a look at your rationale for doing this, meaning you got to look at your history and make the case that we've been doing this to some degree, just in a different way or a different form, and we want to be more intentional about doing X. So here's the connection. It's no different from when you put your resume together to get a job. What makes you qualify for a job you never had before? Well, it's kind of your connection points to the new job, to the old job. So you got to tell that story. I'm also a big fan, and it's something we talked about in class a little bit too, but I'm a big fan of piloting things for free. So if you've become really, really good at what you're doing and you're trying to expand, if you have some resources, some dollars left aside, I'm a big fan of piloting elements of expansion, innovation, evolution in current or future program opportunities, so that when funding opportunities open up, you can then tell a story based upon what you've piloted. So now you not only have a partner at the table, you not only have your organizational history, but you have recent history of you testing a concept and piloting concept and having real results. The last thing too, I'll tell the story like this. When I graduated with my doctorate, my mother said that my doctorate degree is actually her degree, right? And she would tell that story, and essentially what she was trying to say was that, well, even though I didn't help him write a paper, I didn't help him do anything substantive in the program, I laid the foundation and gave the initial investment that led to him becoming Dr. Clark. So I gave him food, clothing, shelter. I made sure he didn't have anything he wanted or needed for the first 18 years of his life. And that foundational investment led to an ongoing, academic pursuit of ultimately becoming Dr. Clark, right? And there's a story in there. And the story is when you invest in a relationship, their results become your results too. So if you have a partner that you can support on a pilot idea, pilot project, you can invest some dollars in what they're doing and share in the spoils of the success of that concept. That also builds up your resume, credibility, experience, etc. Right? You have $100,000 program and you invested 5,000. You may poo-poo the 5,000 and say, "Well, I didn't invest much." Or you can have the attitude of, "We invested 5,000. We also volunteered and we were also active participants in this process and we learned a lot." There's a story there. And then when you approach this partner to say, "Hey, I really want to do X, Y, and Z, would love for you to work with me on this," there's a higher likelihood that they're going to say, "Sure, let's talk about this," because you've invested something of from your coffers to help and support this. So partners can be extremely valuable in your ability to generate revenue. And the fastest way to raise money is through relationships, not only with funders, but also with other providers who are willing to write you into a grant as a sub, who are willing to partner with you or who are willing to be a sub to you, supporting your efforts. I can go on and on and on about that. But yeah, it can make a significant difference in your journey of raising money. Let's see here. I'll share this presentation. And maybe this will help, just to help you think through the concepts that we're talking about. Let me share my screen here, and this is one of several presentations that I've given that talks about how to write in a pretty good grant. So number one, we talked about relationships, fast way to raise money. Um, so the slowest way to raise money is through strategy. All right. And it's your
Mhm.
strategic plan and other documents in place. But what I'm getting ready to share with you falls into that category. Listen, this can help you raise money, but it's going to be slow. Just understand this. So there are a couple of things you need to kind of master when it comes to grant writing. Number one, you got to plan the writing process. So when we engage our clients and we serve as a grant writer for our clients, we plan the process a year out in advance. We have a calendar of what's due. We also have a specific due date when we like to submit grants to our clients for their review and editing, because we know that life happens, stuff happens at the workplace, delays happen. Our commitment is that they will always submit a grant on time, but it begins with our writing process and when we write, how we write, our journey of getting from nothing to something. I would encourage you to think about that. I would encourage you to think about number two, you got to become creative in your writing process. So there's like the raw data and information about your program that you have, right? There's nothing cool or sexy about it, right? It is what it is. But when you have that stuff written down on paper, it is helpful to learn how to say what's on paper differently, creatively, artistically, poetically. If you don't have that skill, then gather some people around you who can help tell the same story but differently to a different audience and start to develop the language around that. Next up, develop the right writing techniques. We talked about some of those. Terminology. So you got to have the terminology down relative to the subject matter you're writing about, and that's relevant to the funder. Again, if funders can read your stuff and determine you don't have the basic knowledge, and they know that because of the terminology you're using or not using, that can be a deterrent to funding you. Also, develop a storytelling approach. There's a guy, I think his name is Andy Goodman. He has great framework around how to tell an effective story and practice the writing process. So it's a nonstop process of practice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So